widely scattered showers breaking out. Thursday, many places dry away from the far west.
Europe is in the grip of the most devastating humanitarian crisis since World War II.
The people of Ukraine are facing unimaginable suffering
as their homes are destroyed and their loved ones are killed.
Millions of people are being forced to flee for their lives, carrying only their children, their pets, and the clothes on their back.
The pain, loss and destruction grows by the day.
The people of Ukraine urgently need our help.
Already a vast humanitarian operation is underway. Britain's Disasters Emergency Committee, or DEC, brings together 15 leading aid charities to respond to overseas disasters quickly and efficiently. These charities include the British Red Cross, CARE, Oxfam, Save the Children and World Vision.
Their teams are working on the ground in Ukraine and neighbouring countries to bring vital aid to those who need it most. If you can spare it, your gift to the DEC's humanitarian appeal will go a really long way.
£10 provides essential hygiene supplies for a person for a month.
£50 provides blankets for 4 families.
£100 provides emergency food for 2 families per month.
It's easy to give. You can donate online at dec.org.uk or call the 24-hour donation line on 0370 60 60 900. If you prefer to send a cheque, please post it to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal, PO Box 999, London, EC 3A 3AA. To give £10 on your mobile, simply text the word crisis to 70150. Standard network charges apply for calls and you must be 16 or over. Texts are charged at the standard network rate and your £10 donation will be added to your bill.
100% of your donation goes directly to the DEC to save lives and deliver critical support where it's needed. Hello there, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry and this is Dewbs & Co, the show where we'll get into some of the things that have got you talking today. Now, the man who killed the MP, Sir David Amess, has today been found guilty of murder. What are the threats facing MPs and how do we keep them safe? And in the presidential election over in France at the weekend, Marine Le Pen came closer to Emmanuel Macron than many thought possible. Is she in with a chance of success? And what would the impact be on Europe if she won? And Boris Johnson has been for a walkabout in Ukraine. Be brave, like Boris, said the Ukrainian Defence Ministry. Is Britain leading the way when it comes to Ukraine? And get this, nearly half of teachers say they're going to quit by 2027. Are we working our teachers too hard? Interested in your views on that? All of that to come, but first, the latest news headlines.
Just after 6 o'clock, I'm Polly Middlehurst, and as you've been hearing, our top story today, Ali Harbi Ali has been found guilty of murdering Sir David Amess. The 26-year-old repeatedly stabbed the Conservative MP in his Essex constituency last October. It took the jury just 18 minutes to return a unanimous verdict. Ali was also found guilty of preparing acts of terrorism and is due to be sentenced on Wednesday. Detective Superintendent Dominic Murphy said Ali was self-radicalised.
It's important to remember that Ali Harbi Ali's attack was an attack against democracy. Sir David was helping the community of Essex at the time of his murder. And so I hope this trial helps to bring some closure for the family.
Well, the 2 unarmed police officers who tackled Sir David Amess's murderer have been given a bravery award. Essex Police say PC Ryan Curtis and PC Scott James were awarded the Merit Star in a private ceremony in November. The Austrian Chancellor says his meeting with Vladimir Putin in Moscow did not leave him optimistic. He told reporters the Russian offensive in eastern Ukraine is evidently being prepared on a massive scale. Karl Nehammer is the first EU leader to meet Vladimir Putin in Moscow since the invasion began. And he said the talks were very direct, open and tough. Meanwhile, the mayor of Kharkiv in Ukraine says the city's been under constant shelling today with multiple deaths, including one of a child. In the north of the country, rescuers are still searching through rubble for those missing in a town near Kyiv. President Zelensky says the situation in Borodyanka is significantly more dreadful than in nearby Busha, where locals say dozens of civilians were killed by Russian troops. Here, Imran Ahmed Khan's lawyers say he plans to appeal after the Conservative MP was found guilty of sexually assaulting a 15-year-old boy. Southwark Crown Court heard how Khan forced the teenager to drink alcohol and watch pornography before the assault took place in 2008. And Downing Street says the Chancellor still has the full backing of the Prime Minister after an investigation was launched into his finances. It's emerged Rishi Sunak held a US green card while in office and that his wife holds non-domicile status, saving her millions of pounds in tax on her foreign earnings. Mr Sunak says his family followed the rules and hopes the review will provide further clarity. From today, millions of people in the UK will see a rise in their state pensions, but it won't be enough to match the growing cost of living. Pensions and universal credit benefits have increased by 3.1%, but the Office for Budget Responsibility says inflation could hit 8.7% later this year. That's the worst for 40 years. Pensioners in South Wales told GB News the financial boost won't cover their increasing cost of living.
The pension's going up maybe £4 a week if you're lucky. At the moment, my gas and electric has gone up £95, and that's not going to help me at all.
People are talking about heating or eating, that's the tagline, and I feel very strongly about that. As you get older, you need a warm house, you need good nutritional food, and it's not going to cover the cost.
Pensioners in South Wales. Well, hundreds of food bank providers have been writing to the Prime Minister and the Chancellor, warning that charities are struggling to keep up with the relentless demand. The Independent Food Aid Network says the government must act urgently to combat rising levels of poverty and hunger across the UK. It says it's deeply concerned about the scale of suffering and that many families are at breaking point. Now, as millions try to get away for their Easter holiday break, the British road network is expected to be the busiest it's been for almost a decade. The RAC estimates 21.5 million cars will set off between Good Friday and Easter Monday. Congestion hotspots over the break include the M6 North, the M25 clockwise and the A303. And that comes as air and rail travel's also disrupted by staff sickness and planned engineering works. Happy Easter. On TV, online and on your radio via DAB+. You're with GB News. Now more from Dewbs & Co.
Thanks for that, Polly. Well, those Easter getaways sound nice, don't they? If you can get petrol. Have you been to a fuel pump lately? Have you managed to get filled up? I was really struggling, I tell you, over the weekend. Let me know what it's like where you are. Anyway, keeping me company until 7 o'clock tonight, my panel, Dominique Samuels, the writer and broadcaster. Also joining me, Jern Hoey. Now, Jern, I have to say, I was asking you whether you came on, whether or not you was related to Kate Hoey, but this is your first time joining me tonight. Good evening to you. Jern is the Europe Director at the Economist Intelligence Unit. Also keeping me company, Mark Roche, who's a columnist for the French weekly news magazine Le Point. Now, you know the drill on this show. It's not just about us on this panel. No, it is not. It is about you at home as well. What's on your mind tonight? Get in touch with me on email, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet me at Michelle Dewbs or at GB News. Don't forget, if you haven't already, you can subscribe to us on YouTube. We've got an app. We're on the radio, DAB+, and we are all over social media. So wherever you're watching or listening tonight, good evening. You are very welcome. Let's get into our top story, shall we? A 26-year-old Islamic State fanatic has been found guilty of murdering the Conservative MP, Sir David Amess. Mr Amess was stabbed more than 20 times during a constituency surgery in Leigh-on-Sea, Essex, of course, in October 2021. Ali Harbi Ali from Kentish Town, North London, has denied the charges and claimed that he targeted the MP over his vote for airstrikes on Syria. Well, let's go over, shall we, to our Home Affairs and Security Editor, Mark Wyatt, who was at the Old Bailey for his verdict this afternoon. Good evening, Mark. What's the latest?
Good evening, Michelle. Well, Ali Harbi Ali had shown contempt, really, for this whole trial process from the very start and continued that today again as he refused to stand up in the dock as the jury returned their verdicts. And for the jury, well, this is the as far as jury deliberations are concerned, the quickest jury deliberations I've ever covered in many trials over the years. It took them just 18 minutes, having been sent out to return with their verdicts, guilty of preparing acts of terrorism and also guilty of the murder of Sir David Amess MP, who, as you mentioned there, was stabbed multiple times by this man, and an indication really that the jury just did not buy his defence, the claim that he was doing it in order to protect more Muslims from suffering because of the voting record of MPs like Sir David Amess, who had voted, he said, for the Iraq War in 2014 that led to the bombing of cities like Aleppo. Well, I've been looking back at the murder of a much-loved and respected local MP.
Yes, we're TA, we're waiting.
Outside this Baptist church in Leigh-on-Sea, the first police arrived to reports of a horrific stabbing.
They say he's got a knife and he's just stabbed someone. He's got a knife, but he's allowing you to go in and see
Lying critically wounded inside the church, local MP Sir David Amess.
At the same time, we've got a taser unit 1 minute away, so we're going to go in and take a taser.
Just moments earlier, frantic 999 calls for help.
Please, quick now. The man is wielding a knife. He's threatened me. He's killed David Amess at Belfast Methodist Church.
With the attackers still inside, the unarmed officers decide they have to push forward.
Mate, drop the knife. Drop the knife now! Get it down! We got him. Right, search him.
With the attackers subdued, medics were finally able to reach the stricken MP. But Sir David died at the scene, having suffered more than 20 stab injuries. As he was booked into custody, terrorist Ali Harbi Ali openly admitted his motivation.
Domestic or hate-related in any way? Pardon?
Terror. Earlier, CCTV captured him leaving his London home, heading for Sir David's regular constituency surgery. In his rucksack, the 12-inch-long murder weapon.
When I first came in. Okay.
Despite denying murder in court, in police interviews, the 26-year-old was more candid.
Mr. Ali, is this a terrorist attack?
I mean, I guess, yeah. I killed an MP and I've done it. Yeah. Okay.
Ali showed the first signs of radicalisation in 2014 and was briefly referred to counter-extremism programmes.
It's a reflection of the challenge we face in counter-terrorism today. So after 16 years as a counter-terrorism detective, the threat has diversified significantly. And if an individual is going to sit at home on their own, conducting research, and not tell anyone else about their case, that's part of the challenge that we face. But we do that with the family of those that have been radicalised, with the public, to take every attempt to disrupt and detect terrorism where we can.
Ali had been planning an attack for at least 5 years before he finally struck, scoping out a number of potential victims, including Cabinet Minister Michael Gove, even writing down possible methods of attack, like targeting him during his morning jog. Fellow Cabinet Minister Dominic Raab and Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer were also in his sights.
Southend should be the city of culture.
In the end, he settled on Sir David Amess, an easy target, always accessible to his constituents.
David was a very special person, and that is why there's been such a deep feeling of tragedy after his murder. This was no ordinary MP, this was someone who was completely dedicated to his job. And to lose someone like that, I think it's affected us all. It's certainly affected me very badly.
That feeling of profound loss was felt most keenly in Sir David's constituency, where locals developed a deep respect for a politician who dedicated much of his time to campaigning for Southend to gain city status. That mission completed posthumously. As he begins life behind bars, Sir David's killer has never shown any remorse for the murder of a much-loved and deeply respected Member of Parliament. Mark White, GB News.
Well, if there is any consolation, it is likely that this 26-year-old will never see the light of day again, because he is over 21 and because he's also been convicted of preparing acts of terrorism. So in other words, terrorism, he will likely spend life behind bars and be given a whole life tariff. That is normally the sentence that is passed for those who commit murder in the name of terrorist ideology. As far as the two police officers who were featured in that report are concerned, those two brave officers who pushed forward to confront this knife attacker, they've received rewards, or awards, I should say, for the bravery that they showed that day, because, of course, they were unarmed. The nearest armed backup was still some minutes away, but they felt that they had to push forward because they knew there was a critically ill man inside that church hall. At the end of the day, of course, there was nothing that they could do for Sir David, who had been stabbed more than 20 times and suffered fatal injuries.
Mark White, thanks for that. Dominic Samuels, I have to say, I mean, watching Mark's report there, it makes me go so goosepimply. I mean, you know, that poor man and his family. And, you know, there's so many things that come out off the back of this, so many questions that people have. How do we keep MPs safe? You know, what do we do about Islamist terrorists that really do want to create harm to people? I mean, so much to unpick here, but what's your thoughts on some of this?
Well, firstly, just watching that, it was so harrowing. It was absolutely awful to watch. But, you know, I think, especially in this day and age, that MPs should be afforded a certain level of protection. And I think the general public wouldn't have a problem with that, knowing that there are direct threats to you know, our public officials out there, because as the report said, it wasn't just David Amess that was a target. You know, it was Michael Gove, it was Dominic Raab, it was Sir Keir Starmer. So this is clearly an issue, and it's not the first time this has happened, for example, with Joe Cox. So, you know, I don't think the public would necessarily have an issue with MPs being afforded some sort of protection. So
what are you saying then, that you think that MPs should have, what, security guards, 24/7 security guards?
Well, I'm not sure about 24/7 security guards, but I think in particular reference to, say, for example, when they hold surgeries, that I think that there should be some level of vetting and some level of security there, because I don't really think in this day and age it makes sense for them to just be there, because as we've seen, there are crazies out there who genuinely do think that they are right in actually murdering people in the name of some sort of warped political ideology.
Yeah, and Jen, I mean, one of the the saddest things in all of this is David Amess wanted to be as accessible as possible to the people that he was elected to serve, wasn't he?
Yeah, I mean, I wrote down that phrase from the report there, always accessible. And, you know, in many ways, he was you know, he set a very high bar, high standard, I think, for MPs. And this is a very important aspect of our democracy in this country, that MPs are accessible to their constituents, to members of the public. And they do that through these open surgeries. And I think that we do need to talk about the safety of MPs, because MPs have been attacked. And in the past 5 years, or in 2016 and 2021, we had 2 MPs murdered. So it's right that there should be a debate about that. But I think we don't want to put up barriers between the public and our MPs, because we already live in a society where there's too much of a distance between politicians and parties and members of the public, you know, where a lot of the time politicians don't know what their constituents are thinking about and feeling about certain issues. So I think that's really important to try and retain that, and we can't keep everybody in a bubble and absolutely safe, and we should do what is sensible, I think, in terms of surgeries and having some kind of presence there, but we don't want to undo that really important aspect of democracy.
I think what I found odd in light of the murder was that some of the conversation, well, a lot of the conversation was wrongly actually turning to social media, and it was made into a conversation about MPs not receiving nasty comments on social media.
Yeah, absolutely.
And whilst I understand that, you know, directly threats of violence on social media should never be condoned, but I was a bit uncomfortable because it seemed to be, this murder seemed to be used as an excuse by some people to call for more social media censorship, and I don't necessarily think that's the issue.
I think that's an interesting point. Mark, what's your take on all this?
Well, I'm a great admirer of the British system, and I agree with Joan. You know, in France, no one knows who the MPs, it's proportional list, they don't hold surgery, and they don't have any give and take with their constituents. And I remember interviewing David Cameron, a constituency surgery day in near Oxford. And it was extraordinary that you had the Prime Minister of the UK who has some other things to do than that, really relating to his constituents. So we shouldn't go completely berserk about the threat, which you have in every country. I'm sure the security service can do their job. Surgery should not be transformed into like a fortress. And I think we should keep the system as is going because it is a pillar of British democracy, which I admire.
Yeah, I mean, just to recap, I mean, I know Joan, you was mentioning a couple of previous examples. Of course, we had Joe Cox shot, stabbed to death, and that was in 2016. Labour MP Stephen Timms. I mean, this is fairly similar in some ways because he was actually stabbed twice in 2010. This was, and the reason that was quoted for that, the person that did it said that was in response to Tim's vote for the Iraq war. And Dominique, I do think that you raise an interesting point there because when this happened, it was almost a desire to ignore what had actually happened and instead divert the conversation around to let's not call each other names on Twitter.
Yeah.
And most people were looking at this saying, well, what are you talking about? Because, yeah, OK, well, let's not insult each other on Twitter, of course, but that hasn't got anything to do with this.
Yeah, because we know what the problem was in each of, you know, the case with the Labour MP and also Sir David Amess. It was, you know, fundamental Islam. And I think this is quite an uncomfortable thing for people to talk about, admittedly, but I don't necessarily think that talking about, you know, radicalisation, I don't think it needs to be such a divisive conversation because I think the rise of terrorism, and I have an example here, there was a report from September 2021 and it found that the number of children arrested for terrorism offences is the highest since records began. And that includes both extreme right-wing ideology and obviously it includes religious extremism. And I think what this demonstrates is that our society is becoming increasingly fragmented and divided, and on both sides of the political aisle, nobody is actually willing to speak to the average person about how they feel about, say, issues such as immigration, about, you know, employment issues, about the cost of living. And that's why we are actually seeing the development of more extreme ideologies, both fundamentalist Islam and right-wing extremism. And unless we actually have that conversation, we won't get anywhere. And I mean, the vote to leave the EU, for example, was really a vote that said, hey, we're not really happy with the current system. We want to be able to control our borders. Politicians do something about it. And although we've had to fight to get the vote to leave the EU actually recognised, I don't think that enough of the issues that is causing such societal fragmentation has actually been addressed.
Yeah, I think that's, you make a really important point there. I think in a democracy, nothing should be off the agenda. You know, nothing should be off the table in terms of the issues that we talk about. You know, so there's a clear link here. I think that the point about democracy, I mean, this was a heinous crime. This man has showed complete contempt in court for British justice. He's a self-declared Islamist terrorist. And his aim is to destroy and undermine democracy. That is the aim of IS, after all. I think in become, all these contentious issues, they're no longer discussed. It's like, there's some danger here in discussing these sorts of events. There seems to be an inclination to take these issues off the public agenda or the agenda of public debate.
But what do you think's driving that?
Well, I think that, first of all, what it does show is a certain contempt for the electorate and for the average voter, because I think it suggests that people think we're not to be trusted, that we can't handle difficult topics or contentious issues about which people have strong views, whether it's immigration, whether it's Islamist terrorism. But these are things that we need to are really important to discuss. And if we drive them out of the arena of public debate, people are not going to stop talking about it. So we need to have a public debate about it. And I think there was an attempt to obfuscate what was going on at the time.
We had 4 years, 5 years with the Brexit debate about all these issues. And it was very nasty. And I suppose after Brexit, people were a bit afraid of relaunching all these dividing issues like immigration.
But I think that's the issue, is that it still doesn't seem to have been listened to. Like, even with the, the migrant crisis across the Channel, again, that issue is something that people have an issue with, especially when it comes to people coming here, a lot of the time illegally, because a lot of the people that are coming here are coming here for economic reasons. There's no way to identify them. We don't know what these people are capable of. And I'm afraid, the fact is, this might make people feel a bit uncomfortable, but some of the people that are coming here claiming asylum do end up committing crimes and actually also committing acts of terror in a lot of European countries. And that's really a conversation that we should be able to have, but it seems that we're not. And unless, like I said, we are able to have that conversation, actually get honest about it, people are going to verge on to the extremes, whether that be fundamental Islam, not feeling like you belong in Europe, and whether that be being on the right of the spectrum and feeling like, your homeland is basically being invaded.
Well, we will be talking about another divided country in just a second when we come back from the break. I want to talk about France. Who is going to be France's next president? You will have seen at the weekend Marine Le Pen came much closer to Macron than many would have thought possible. We'll have that and more after the break.
Europe is in the grip of the most devastating humanitarian crisis since World War II.
The people of Ukraine are facing unimaginable suffering
as their homes are destroyed and their loved ones are killed.
Millions of people are being forced to flee for their lives, carrying only their children, their pets, and the clothes on their back.
The pain, loss, and destruction grows by the day.
The people of Ukraine urgently need our help.
Already a vast humanitarian operation is underway. Britain's Disasters Emergency Committee, or DEC, brings together 15 leading aid charities to respond to overseas disasters quickly and efficiently. These charities include the British Red Cross, CARE, Oxfam, Save the Children, and World Vision.
Their teams are working on the ground in Ukraine and neighbouring countries to bring vital aid to those who need it most. If you can spare it, your gift to the DEC's humanitarian appeal will go a really long way.
£10 provides essential hygiene supplies for a person for a month.
£50 provides blankets for 4 families.
£100 provides emergency food for 2 families per month.
It's easy to give. You can donate online at dec.org.uk or call the 24-hour donation line on 0370 60 60 900. If you prefer to send a cheque, please post it to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal, PO Box 999, London, EC 3A 3AA. To give £10 on your mobile, simply text the word crisis to 70150. Standard network charges apply for calls and you must be 16 or over. Texts are charged at the standard network rate and your £10 donation will be added to your bill.
100% of your donation goes directly to the DEC to save lives and deliver critical support where it's needed.
Hello Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry. Keeping me company tonight until 7, Dominique Samuels, the right-hand broadcaster. Also, Joan Hoey, the Europe Director at the Economist Intelligence Unit, and Marc Roche, who's a columnist for the French weekly news magazine Le Point. Is it Le Point or Le Point?
Le Point.
Le Point. I mean, I probably shouldn't start trying to do French accents. I mean, come on, French accent when you're Northern, it doesn't sound right, does it? Let's be honest. Anyway, let's talk about France.
I could do a French accent.
You can what?
I could do a French accent.
Go on then.
No.
Oh, there you go. She can. She'll do it in the break. Private performance for me. Anyway, let's speak about France, shall we? Because in the first round of the French elections yesterday, polling results showed that the far-right candidate, Marine Le Pen, is just 4 points behind President Emmanuel Macron. Both, of course, have gone through to the second round of voting, which will take place on the 24th of April. This time, they'll both need votes from people who perhaps naturally wouldn't vote for either of them. So what do we think to this? Could Marine Le Pen cause a bit of a shock in France and win the French election? Mark, I mean, there's so much to unpick here. First things first, I want to ask you, Marine Le Pen, I mean, she's often described, I've just done it then myself, as extreme far right. Is that accurate?
Well, she has taken advantage by the fact that there was a real far right candidate called Eric Zemmour, who was completely anti-Islam, anti-immigration, that was his only. And she very intelligently went to more traditional right by focusing on a thing Macron completely forgot, which is the cost of living, which is a big issue in the UK, and enormous issue in France, as we have seen with the Gilets jaunes. And she focused on that while he was busy with Ukraine and the higher things of state. And he has never been very good at feeling. He's a bit arrogant, he's a bit aloof. He called himself the Jupiter presidency, you know, he's there. And she has sort of presented herself as center-right. No, the problem is that is she really changing the leopard skin, or simply is it the same person who took an opportunity there? I think she will be beaten because Macron has done much better than expected, now 28%. She's still 4%, but he has a bigger reservoir of vote on the left who will either abstain or will decide they really can't vote for her and they will vote by keeping their nose closed for Macron. So I expect him to win, but very tight and have a difficult second mandate.
Shall I just put the poll results up, by the way, on the screen as we're talking, just in case you haven't seen them? Just a quick reminder as to how they currently looked. Have I got that graphic? Yes, there you go. I think what we'll start with doing is looking at 2017, because that is a poll. What people often do will reference back to Macron and Le Pen and how it looked. And actually, if we go back to 2017, Macron got 24%. This time he got just shy of 28%. Le Pen got 21%. This time just over 23%. And I think what's interesting is, of course, when you go to the second round, I mean, Le Pen got absolutely smacked. She got 33.9% of the second round. Macron got 66% there. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens at that second round. Joan, your thoughts on all this?
Yeah, well, I think it will be very difficult for Le Pen to win because you just have to do the maths. So if you look at the actual number of votes, so in the first round, not just the percentages, so Macron got 9.8 million, Le Pen got 8.1 million. So he's already 1.7 million ahead. And then he can anticipate that he will take the votes from the kind of old, obliterated now traditional parties, the Socialists and the Republicans.
Yeah, who got next to nothing, by the way.
And the Greens, yeah. But altogether, that's still 4 million votes that are probably going to go to him. And then there's the question of the third place candidate who did very well, even better than expected, Jean-Luc Mélenchon, who now 56% of his voters have said that they will abstain. That leaves about 3.5 million.
And tellingly, he didn't ask his voters
to vote
back
for Macron. No,
Yeah,
he just said don't vote for Le Pen. Now, you know, whether many of his voters can bring themselves to vote for Macron, who they revile, really, and do not like at all, is one question. But say their votes got split, you know, 2 million for Macron, 1.5 for Le Pen. You know, it becomes very hard to beat Macron. So to win, what would it take for her to win? It would take that she would actually have to get a very significant percentage of Mélenchon's vote and quite a lot of the fringe candidates' votes as well, which is another few million. But they're generally on the kind of other side of the political spectrum, on the left. I mean, I don't think left-right means that much anymore in France. It's the France of the forgotten against which is what Le Pen calls them, and the others. And this is what you know, technocratic politics and centrism has created in France.
But just very quickly on a point, the big thing will be the debate when they are face to face, because that's a breaking in every presidential election, especially the last one when she did very badly. And the debate will be around the economy, which is a weakest point for Le Pen, and which is a strong point, although he didn't do very well by forgetting the cost of living, the strong point of Macron, because he's a former banker and he's also a former minister of economy. So that's why.
But he's also been president for half a decade. So if he was going to do anything to help people with cost of living, etc., some people might suggest that he would have sown some of those seeds in the prior years whilst he's held that office.
Yeah, and I think that in terms of the race, whilst I'm not so sure that Le Pen will be able to win, I don't think it's fair to say that, you know, she doesn't have a chance, because she does, I think, have a chance. I think some polls put her at 49% to Macron's 51%.
In the second round?
In the second round. And for Mélenchon's voters, although, yes, a lot of them are going to be abstaining, there was one poll that showed that 19% of them will be actually lending their vote to Le Pen. For Valérie Pécresse, who was part of the Republicans, although she said that she would be voting for Macron, another member of a party that was quite senior actually came out and said that he would be voting for Le Pen because the Republicans performed the worst that they'd ever performed. And I think what's interesting about, like you said, Eric Zemmour, is that it looks like Zemmour actually hasn't hoovered up any of Marine Le Pen's votes. It seems that the votes have actually transferred from the Republicans to Zemmour. And I think most of that, in my personal opinion, is because a lot of people on the right, or those that see themselves as more traditional conservatives, they're far more sceptical of sort of aligning themselves with the Le Pen brand and the attitude of her father, who was an open racist and Holocaust denier. And for them, you know, it's still very much the Front National. But Eric Zemmour, he actually did come out in support of Le Pen, and he got about 7.2%. So I think she is in with a chance. But like you said, I think it does depend on the second debate. Everyone sort of agrees that she did terribly. But I think her policies, focusing on the cost of living, wanting to cut taxes, remove income tax for under 30s, a lot of those policies are quite popular, whereas Macron has been quite unpopular, especially with older voters.
And it's very rare that a French president going into a second mandate, as you said, is so unpopular as a person. There is something in Macron that many people dislike. His aloofness, his technocratic background, and his lack of rapport.
Isn't that the case for all leaders? You're going to have people that really like you and people that really are not happy with you.
Marine Le Pen. Marine Le Pen is a very outward-looking. She goes to the people, cost of living. Not the case of Jean-Luc Mélenchon, the left-wing person with a tribun and speak like de Gaulle and all that. Macron, there is something the French don't like in him. He will be re-elected, I think. But
there's no good outcomes, really, are there, in a way, because what we're going to end up with, even if Macron gets re-elected, we've got a France that is the most divided country in the EU. It's, you know, a very disaffected population, and more than 50% of the country feels disenfranchised and will feel disenfranchised if Macron is elected again. So I think, and we've got this implosion of political parties, traditional parties. So I think actually we could have a lot of social unrest in France.
And they're very different in terms of their policies, by the way. So just in case people are not familiar, so Macron, for example, wants to raise the retirement age from 62 to 65. In complete contrast to that, Le Pen wants to lower it. So she wants the retirement age to be 60 if you've worked for 40 years. Le Pen, as Dominic was just saying, no income tax for under 30s. She wants to have a referendum on stricter rules for immigration. Macron, for example, he's saying he wants more police officers, more health service staff, etc. One of the things that I found quite interesting about Le Pen, Mark, was around Brexit and her kind of views on that. It used to be very, very strong, didn't it? And it seems to have altered slightly.
Well, she used to be a Frexit supporter, as the Brexit French ways is known. And she realized that despite the shortcoming of the EU, France, one of the founding members, is in general attached to stay in the EU, although a reform EU, although in 2005 they voted against the Maastricht Treaty and it was not recognized. But she is now saying, we'll accept the EU, but we will veto laws, European law, that go against the interests of the French workers. And so that will create a lot of problem with Brussels, like it is at the moment with Poland and Hungary on other things. And she, I think for the British, there's also a problem because she will close the agreement on Calais to stop the illegal migration. She will stop the defense agreement, bilateral agreement between the UK and France. So from the British point of view, they have an interest, although Macron has been an unpleasant partner, that Macron stays in power.
Let me know your thoughts. Lots of you getting in contact, by the way, about that initial topic about MPs and security and what should we do there. A mixture of views, actually, around whether or not MPs should have security. Lee has been in touch saying, well, they don't necessarily need security. Lee says, why wouldn't they just have a screen when they're out doing their surgeries, etc. Like he says, bank clerks have a screen. I've got to say, some of the McDonald's that I visit, they have a screen. But is that what you want? Is that what you want? You want your MPs behind kind of plastic screening? I don't know.
No.
Is that not what you want?
No, it's a bit clinical, like the plastic screening thing, especially like my experience of it just through the COVID theatre is that, and you find it difficult to actually hear people as well. So,
I don't know. Yeah. If I was an MP, I probably would feel a bit safer behind a plastic screen, but I'd feel an awful lot safer as well if there was a big burly security guard stood next to me as well, I've got to be honest. But let me know your thoughts on those last two topics, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Nigel said, Michelle, I've just missed the start of your programme. I only just tuned in. What have I missed? Nigel, worry not. You can catch up on the app or YouTube. You've missed us debating about how to keep MPs safe and, of course, what's going on in France with Le Pen and Macron. But you can catch up, so all is not lost. Right, let's talk Boris Johnson, shall we? He made a surprise visit to Kiev this weekend and met President Zelensky. After the visit, Zelensky praised Boris Johnson and said that the leadership shown by the UK would, I quote, go down in history. For his part, Boris Johnson has pledged more weapons to help Ukraine. Where do we go with this? The Ukrainian Defence Ministry has tweeted the following. We welcome Boris Johnson in Kiev, the first G7 leader to arrive in Ukraine since the beginning of the large-scale war. We're strengthening our union of democracies. Be brave like Boris and be brave like Ukraine. Joan, obviously Ursula von der Leyen was there just before Boris, so this is not the first kind of European leader to visit Kiev, but many were very proud, I guess, to see Boris Johnson wandering around Ukraine. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I must say I didn't notice Ursula von der Leyen's visit at all. But I did notice Boris Johnson's visit, and obviously everybody else did too. I think this was a good news story. I think this was a very positive thing. Obviously it was very symbolic. Many of his detractors said this, this is just a PR operation and so on. Well, Yeah, to some degree it is, but that is the point of it. It was Boris Johnson representing the UK and the UK government saying we stand with Ukraine, and I've come here, to make that commitment very clear. So I think that was positive. Obviously, for some people, the UK Prime Minister can do no right at all, whatever he does. But, we did hear it from the horse's mouth from President Zelensky himself, that they saw this as a very positive move, and they also considered that the UK's role in this crisis has been a very important one. And the UK has been quite decisive. It's been more committed than many other European countries. It obviously aligned itself with the US before the invasion occurred, and also was training the Ukrainian military for some time before that, and has supplied weapons and provided aid and so on. I think it shows actually the benefits of having an independent foreign policy, that you can be much more agile, that you can be more decisive, that you can, take the decisions. And I think he recognised probably at a very early stage that the principle for which the Ukrainians are fighting for sovereignty and self-determination was an absolutely critical one. And that's why we should stand with Ukraine. And obviously those are principles that have been much denigrated in recent years, not least in this country. But in this fight, we see just how important sovereignty really is.
Dominique?
Yeah, I think objectively speaking, Boris Johnson has really been quite the leader in regards to Ukraine. What I find interesting, though, is that, the country, I think, that's mostly responsible for this conflict, the United States, really hasn't played that much of a pivotal role in this conflict. Personally, for me, I think that Joe Biden, throughout this whole thing, even, the years leading up to this invasion, I think that America has loaded the gun, and now Joe Biden is loading the gun and letting other powers fire it.
Why do you think America's responsible for this?
Because in regards to NATO expansion, America is the principal feature of this. The reason why Russia has said it is invading Ukraine is because, number one, it wants NATO to make clear that Ukraine isn't going to join, and America at various points has kept that door open rather on purpose, I think. And Joe Biden in the 1990s, even verbatim out of his own mouth, said that the one reason why conflict and war would begin again in Europe is if NATO continued its expansion in Eastern Europe. And the President of the United States said that. So I think he should be playing far more of a pivotal role than he is right now.
Mark?
Well, well done to Boris Johnson, because the British government was quick to react. They muddled a bit the sanction because they didn't want to make the other rich people from the Middle East or from Asia afraid about their money. So that was not as well done, but in terms of the armaments, it was very quick, it was very agile. Brexit helps, of course, because the UK doesn't have to wait 27 opinions. But I think for me, the real problem of Ukraine is Germany, because unless Germany, after the disastrous, we know it now, policy of Merkel on energy, and completely aligning itself with Russia, will have to take the hard decision, which is to diminish the imports of gas from Russia.
So let me ask you on this, because this comes up all the time. What do you think the impact would be on Germany of basically just cutting off that dependency on Russian,
poor German people,
energy?
You know, if you see how Germany imposed on Greece and all during the Euro crisis, a terrible policy of diminishing expense and all that sort of thing. They can suffer a bit by helping the Ukrainians.
I'm asking you, what do you think? Because, I mean, I think they get like 40% of their energy. For a country, basically, to suddenly cease getting 40% of its energy supply, I'm asking you, what do you think the impact on its citizens will be?
They can do it progressively. They don't have right away to stop 40%.
I mean, that's what they're saying they're more willing to do. They're more willing to progressively...
But they haven't done anything. They haven't done armaments. They haven't done sanction,
for me,
really, and they haven't done diminishing. And you know, in Europe, it's Germany that matters.
But at the same time, why did the USA approve Nord Stream 2, which would stand to benefit Germany and Russia? Why did Joe Biden, much, you know, to the odds of members of his own party and also the Republican Party, Joe Biden approved Nord Stream 2, knowing that it would basically be handing power to Russia, and then America itself has basically cut off its ability to produce its own energy independently.
Everyone accepts.
And he's loaded the gun and then just been like, oh, right, it's Germany's problem, it's Europe's problem. Why aren't more people calling out Joe Biden? That's my contention.
I mean, I think on this, I think you do make an important point. And the first point I would make is that Russia and Russia alone is responsible for this war. Russia made the decision to invade. Now, I'm very familiar with the kind of long list of complaints from Russia about the West and NATO and the US not taking its security concerns seriously, which is absolutely true. I've followed it in great detail over many years. But even you can't take away the agency from Russia and Vladimir Putin, even if you feel that your back's against the wall. This is an indefensible war. It's an abomination. And I think it is pretty clear who is on the right side here. Now, having said that, we do have to ask the question how we got here. And I think, you know, when historians look back at this, they will have to conclude that this is a massive failure of diplomacy over a very long period of time. And things could have been done in a different way. And you have to ask the question, you know, was this a deliberate, you know, policy to push Russia to actually encourage Ukraine in its aspirations to join NATO and then actually to leave it to fight pretty much alone, regardless of because of what the West is now doing. So, you know, things are never as black and white.
NATO never said they want Ukraine in. It was especially with the Germans.
They did say that the door would be open, and
the door will be open.
Yeah,
but like with the EU.
Yeah, but when Joe Biden met Putin last year in 2021. He also refused to make clear that Ukraine wouldn't be joining NATO. Why? I don't get it.
Ian's just written in and said, well, hang on a second. NATO's expanded because countries want to join, and in a democracy, that's up to them. If they want to join and the organisation wants to have them, what's it got to do with anyone else?
Yeah, but we don't want, no country want to fight Russia, isn't it? And as we sympathize with Ukraine and the horror about what's going, no one has said we will fight the Russians.
It's time to look at reality
if Ukraine is part of NATO, NATO has to fight for Ukraine if the Russian attack. So.
But Mark, you say that nobody's saying we want to fight Russia. Of course nobody's saying that, and no sane-minded individual would even think that. But where I worry a little bit is Alex, for example, has emailed in saying, yes, we're leading the way and all the rest of it, and yes, people can say it's good, but his concern is, are we opening ourselves up essentially to the wrath of Putin? Many people might have seen that video where a UK missile has apparently shot down a Russian drone, and the video is kind of them saying, thank you, Britain, kind of thing. Yes. And I think there's some people out there that are worried, and you know, are we tiptoeing our way into potential World War III? I think that's the worry of many people. You guys have been getting in touch, by the way, on that first topic we did about how to keep MPs safe. George says, well, MPs can have security, but they must fund it themselves. Why should an MP have to fund being safe in their own job? I don't know what job you do, but don't you have a right to be safe whilst you're at work? Martin has said MPs should wear stab vests. Really? If you're an MP, do you think that you should have to wear a stab vest?
That's
we have to remember.
A lot of people off.
Yeah, we have to remember that you're going to work. I don't know what jobs you all do, but if you go to work, should you have to wear a stab vest when you get there? Anyway, let's cut to the chase on our next story for time reasons, shall we? Almost half of teachers, apparently, in England plan to leave the profession within the next 5 years. Long story short, they're blaming things like unmanageable workloads, stress and lack of levels of trust in them by the public. Dominique, your thoughts on this?
I think principally that teachers could get a better deal. I think that, say for example, I think the average teacher earns minimum about 25 grand per annum. I think maybe you could help in some way by making some more of that income tax-free. Give teachers...
What's 25 grand?
The minimum starting salary for the
Oh, right, yeah, but
teacher.
their average salary is above UK average salary, from what I understand. So
But then you've also got to factor in taxation. So say if a teacher's on, say, a 25 grand salary, their take-home pay would be about £20,000.
Yeah, but that's the law of the land. Everyone gets taxed on
Yeah, but if you factor in sort of the
Unless
cost...
you're Rishi Sunak's wife.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, like, if you factor in the cost of living, and to be honest, I kind of think this across the board, I think we do need a bit more relief in terms of taxes, especially with regards to how fast prices are rising. But I think if there were a few more incentives for teachers, I think you would be attracting more of the right people into the profession. Because I think what we have right now is we have people that want to project their own ideology onto children. For example, throughout COVID, it was the unions that were saying, you know, we don't want to open schools, we want to teach remotely, we want to do this, that, and I feel as though specifically the teaching unions, they've become very ideological, and it seems to veer more towards the left. And I think that, you know, if we gave more incentives, I think we'd be attracting more of the right people.
Joan, would you be a teacher?
Well, no, not now. I wouldn't. I don't want to really work in the public sector. But I don't know what to say about this. My kids all finished school now quite a long time ago. I mean, I can understand that teaching might seem like a bit of a joyless profession at times now because of the way the national curriculum is. And I think it's moved quite a long way from the kind of idea of teachers being specialists in particular subjects and teaching their subjects and really enjoying doing that. And yeah, I think a lot of it has got quite ideological.
They turned into social workers as well,
yeah,
in my opinion.
I don't think that's good. I've no doubt that they're under a lot more pressure from parents as well. They probably don't get paid enough. They have all this admin to do. I actually sympathise much more with classroom assistants who a lot of the time are doing teachers' jobs and getting paid an absolute pittance. But I don't really know what is going on, but we do seem to have professions now that are just kind of moaning all the time about what they do, whether that's, you know, the kind of doctors and GPs, surgeries, and the teaching profession. And I find it hard to believe that the job is so much more difficult or hard work, you know, than other people's jobs.
Very, very, very briefly, in just a few seconds, your thoughts?
Same problem in France. I've always thought that being a teacher is a vocation. It's a very important job, and that at the moment, as my two colleagues have said, you seem to have constant complaint and constant, at the end of the day, you know, you teach for the future of the nation.
For the future of the nation. Well, Mark on the email, he's not having anything. He's saying, is this April the 1st, Michelle? What are you talking about teachers overworked? Are you having a laugh? He says they've done everything possible not to work over the past 2 years, yet still receive their full pay and pensions. Tell them to go into the private sector and see how the world really works. You're not messing around, Mark. By the way, Sean says, all well and good Boris Johnson wandering around in Ukraine. However, he says he's losing focus here in the UK.
Yeah.
Be a hero for GB first. There you go. As for being a teacher, I wouldn't do it for love nor money. I don't like other people's kids enough. Would you? Let me know your thoughts. Anyway, that's all we've got for tonight. Have a good evening, and I'll see you tomorrow.
Hello, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Warmer and drier weather is on the way for this Easter weekend. But before that happens, some cloud and rain to talk about. Those outbreaks of rain are currently moving around an area of low pressure which sits to the southwest of the UK. With that low to the southwest, various features are running north as we go through tonight and introducing a lot of cloud and showers, as well as longer spells of rain. For example, northern and eastern Scotland turning particularly damp through the early hours. with further heavy showers moving up from the south. By the end of the night, even some rumbles of thunder for Wales and the southwest. 10 to 12 Celsius at the crack of dawn on Tuesday. In the south, 5 to 6 further north. But a lot of low clouds, mistiness awaits us as we start off Tuesday, and further bands of rain or showers moving north. Now, by the afternoon, it's central and eastern Scotland, as well as northern and eastern England, where we'll see the more persistent rain. Feeling quite cold, I think, around eastern Scotland with an onshore flow. But warmer weather for Wales, the southwest, Northern Ireland, with some brighter skies, but also some heavy showers developing by the evening. Those showers eventually start to peter out through the night, and the more persistent rain towards the east and the north becomes focused across the far northeast of Scotland. Elsewhere, a lot of drier weather by the start of Wednesday, but also lower clouds, mist and fog, particularly around western and southern shores. So I think a slow start to Wednesday. Eventually the cloud will lift and break up, and we'll see sunny spells developing. The rain in the far northeast slowly peters out. It stays cold here, but where we get the sunny spells elsewhere, it's going to feel warm.